Think about this. At one time in America, church leaders saw the cause of the abolition of slavery and the ending of cruelty to animals as causes that demanded action. It was the church that rose to condemn the evils of institutions that robbed men, women, and children of their full humanity, and that same church that viewed the need to protect the animals from abuse and cruelty. Intellectual Christians like Philadelphia's Dr. Benjamin Rush, a founding father and member of the Constitutional Convention, believed maltreatment of our two- and four-legged friends were warnings of a sick society. But what about today? Where are the Christian voices in discussions about how we raise and harvest pigs, treat chickens, or consider the process of milking cows? Tonight, someone whose experience on his hobby farm led to rethinking his responsibility to every living thing. Stay with us. Bennett thinks and writes about many things, but his passion seems to be writing about ways Christians can live without fear and follow the example of Jesus in every area of life. It's why he founded Every Good Work, an organization with the audacious goal of funding a family for every eligible foster adoption in America. What an extraordinary mission. We will have you back, Than, to talk about that soon. He's also written a pair of powerful books, which are available at Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. But tonight, it's a topic that doesn't get much airspace if you watch Christian TV or conservative talk. It's the question of how we treat animals. What's our responsibility? What's the standard? Who sets that standard? What's the role, if any, of our government? Than Bennett calls his family farm a hobby farm, and that's where he joins us from today. Welcome to State of Independence, Than.
Joe, it really is so wonderful to be with you. Yeah, I'm actually coming to you from a finished end of our barn. And I just want to say that I'm going to take just a little bit of liberty here because I so value, Joe, how you are committed to civility. It is a countercultural idea these days. It is one that I know makes you sort of swimming upstream, but we need forums like this where we can come together. You and I may share some ideas. We may disagree on some ideas, but we need to be able to talk about them civilly. And quite frankly, we need to test those ideas against each other so that the rough edges can get rubbed off and so that they can get strengthened. So I just want to say at the outset, thank you for that. We cherish it. There are still some of us out here who seek that out, and we're grateful that you provide it.
Thank you so much, Than. What a blessing for you to say that. So tell us a little bit about you and Becca and your family.
Yeah, so I have spent 22 years in the public policy world. So much like you, I spent much of my professional career in Washington, D.C. I worked on Capitol Hill in the U.S. House of Representatives. And then I spent 16 years in the nonprofit legal side, mainly working on issues of constitutional law, also worked in the international law space at the United Nations. But as it relates to this conversation, about 3 years ago, Joe, our family, my wife, Brooke, and our three children, Jude, Brell, and Hope, we decided we were going to take sort of a strange step for folks who live in Washington, D.C., and we were going to try to return to some of our roots. I had grown up in central Illinois, surrounded by corn and bean fields, and my wife had grown up in Idaho, a very rural setting. And so we wanted to give our kids, who were 11, 9, and 7 at that time, a taste of that life. And we knew if we didn't do it soon, it would be past us. And so long story short, Joe, and I can share a couple additional stories if you want, but I'll leave it at this for now. We decided we were going to make a move to 5 acres in the middle of the woods, and we were going to start raising animals. And so I told you before we came on the air, we live just across the Potomac River from Mount Vernon. Just don't tell anybody over there that there's a space like this close to DC because we want to keep it. But we raise chickens and ducks and goats and bees.
Did you, as a kid, so you grew up in Illinois, did you raise any of this stuff when you were a kid? I mean, you may have seen it, but did you actually yourself raise any of these animals as a kid, or your wife?
Yeah, so we did. So we had domestic animals, right? We had dogs and cats, and I worked seasonally at a turkey farm, processing turkeys and preparing them for Thanksgiving meal or Christmas meal. But I didn't, Joe. We're right down the street, there was a hog farm, and so I was familiar with it. but I had not grown up with the hands-on experience. And I'll tell you, when it is your responsibility to care for additional creatures that God has made, it does change your perspective.
Yeah. So tell me your sense of this. Like, why aren't more Christian people, thinking or writing about this topic, about the treatment of animals? I mean, I know lots of people have animals. They have dogs or cats primarily, and some people may have some other domesticated pets. But tell me why there aren't more Christian people writing about the treatment of animals. Why it's not a priority in your mind? I mean, because it doesn't seem to be. I mean, we're having this show, and I'm sure that when people start surfing the web for discussions on how you treat animals, we'll probably end up coming up first, because I don't know of a lot of the shows where people are discussing it or talking about it.
Yeah, well, good show selection. That was smart on your part, Joe. But I think there are a couple of reasons for this, and the first one I would give you is that we tend to sort people and issues primarily on politics or on ideology. And what we hear in this space is, from both the right and the left, is something that really pulls us away from a scriptural mandate. You'll hear, from the right, some concern about regulation. And so that can cause conservatives, I'm a conservative, but it causes conservatives to be dismissive of these issues. And then from the left, you have a tendency to lean on the benevolence of government regulation, which can have a tendency to sort of minimize the individual responsibility that I think followers of Jesus have to care for all of creation. So I think that's one primary way, and it's not reflective of Genesis 1, but I think that's one way. I think the other way, Joe, and this is the one I would leave you with, is I think there's maybe a discomfort with grappling with how our food comes to be on our plate. It is easier not to get involved in the details of how that happens. And I'll just tell you this: you can't spend time with a pig who is being raised for sustenance, or with the chickens who are providing you the eggs on a daily basis, without it changing the way you think about how it lands on your plate.
Wow. I have got to believe that's true. I remember we went to I went to a boarding school, and we had a reunion after a 10-year reunion, and one of our classmates was living on a working farm, and I saw this great big pig, on the farm, and he just looked like a wonderful fellow, this pig, and I asked him, I said, now, what's the deal with the pig? Is he like a pet? Or is he going to be bacon, next week on somebody's plate? And the guy laughed. He said, no, we love him, and he's like a pet, and so on and so forth. But obviously that's an issue. I mean, or maybe it's not. I mean, I know that even if people aren't thinking about the treatment of animals, they're certainly thinking about themselves, which is why when you go to certain stores, I know even now I'm more inclined to buy something that's maybe organic. If I'm going to buy ground beef, it's maybe going to be organic, grass-fed ground beef, because my sense of it would be that there are no chemicals, and the beef that's being used, the cows were treated with some semblance of kindness, and or the chickens, free-range eggs from chickens. Those are eggs where the chickens weren't cooped up in in an uncomfortable setting, but where they could roam around freely and kind of live a normal, happy and peaceful life. So I'm inclined to do that stuff, but a lot of it's selfish. It's not, I think for people, it's more like, well, this will help me if I'm not ingesting bad stuff into my system, and it's not nearly as much about how the chickens are treated, or how the cows are treated, or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you two quick examples. First of all, our pigs. The perception of a pig is that they're dirty, stinky, smelly, and really not that fun to interact with. I'll tell you what, we have an entirely different relationship with the pigs that we raise. Yes, they are for consumption. Yes, they are for our nourishment. But they have human interaction from the day they arrive on our farm at just a few weeks old, Joe. And the result is something that I think would surprise a lot of people. The result is an animal that is excited to see us when they come. It's an animal that is playful, will play with you like a dog. It's an animal that is actually very clean if provided ample room to roam and sort of separate out the different functions of their life. And so it's a very different animal than I think is in the perception of the minds of many people. And I'll just tell you one humorous story about chickens, if you will. I was driving out the driveway one day, and our youngest daughter, Hope, was sitting on a stump, and she was surrounded by our chickens. And I rolled down the window and I said, Hope, what are you doing with the chickens? And she looked at me like I was crazy, like should have been obvious what she was doing. And she said, Dad, I'm teaching the chickens tricks. And I'm telling you, Joe, I'm quite sure she was not successful in teaching them any tricks, but I am telling you, they are the happiest chickens on the face of the planet, as are the pigs. And there's a connection here. The animals were meant to be raised and meant to grow in communion with the rest of God's creation. Yes, man sits at the pinnacle of God's creation. He says that very clearly in his word. But it doesn't mean the rest of his createds are not made by his hand. They are placed into our hands for their care and for our sustenance. But we have a duty to them as well. And quite honestly, if we're to live in a way that God designed, we need to start recognizing and stewarding our responsibility as the pinnacle of his creation.
Yeah, that's wonderfully said. I think that's right. If God's Spirit is in us, I always tell folks who ask me, what it means to follow Christ. Does it mean you go to church, every week? Does it mean that you read Scripture and you can recite the Scripture? Well, if you, to me, my thought is that if you follow Christ, if God's Spirit is in you, if you've given your heart to His Son and you're listening to Him, because He says, my children hear my voice. If you're listening to what He says, He's telling us clearly to love Him back with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love our neighbors like we love ourselves. And aren't these animals also our neighbors? I mean, don't they qualify? It would seem to me that the same kindness that we would give to a neighbor or to a stranger, we would likewise show to one of these animals. I know I would be inclined to do such. When I go to people's houses and I see their dog, who I'm meeting for the first time, it's like I'm meeting a person for the first time, and they're curious to meet me, and I'm curious and anxious to meet them too, and it's kind of a nice thing. But shouldn't we have that same love? I mean, we can't divorce ourselves from the Spirit that's in us, which is a kind, sweet, gentle Spirit. I'm just guessing that means that we would, of course, we would be kind to animals. Of course, we would consider them. Of course, we would consider them.
Yeah, I think of this as mandates and invitations, Joe. I really do. We think about Genesis 1, and on day 5, God created the fish and the birds, and then on day 6, He created mankind, and He created the land animals, right? And what did He do at the end of Genesis 1? He gave us a mandate. Yes, it was an obligation. It was a responsibility. It was to care for all that He had created and called very good. So it was a you must, right? A thou shalt. But it's a mandate and an obligation that is not a burden. This is where I get to the invitations point. Can you think of a more special invitation than to be invited by the Creator of all things to come into the heart of His creativity and to be handed over that handiwork, and for Him to say to you, I am giving this to you, I am putting it in your charge? What would you do with that charge, Joe? I think if you had love for God, like you say, and if His love is in you, it would be one of your most primary functions for the rest of your life to care for that creation. And so I just think when we think about how we're going to farm, or how we're going to raise animals, or how we're going to care for the environment, the first thing that we should think about should not be a particular law or whether or not we think the regulation came from the right place. There's a lot of abuse in that regard. Our first thought, Joe, I think should be about that invitation. The Creator of the world invited you and invited me to take His creation and to steward it and to care for it. It's pretty awesome if you think about it in those terms.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, in your case, being now you've evolved from somebody who's in the legislative world to somebody who's in the farming world. It really has significance to you because the world that you're in right now, living on a as you call it. Why do you call it a hobby farm? That's a nice name.
Okay. Here's the honest answer, Joe. You want honesty?
Yeah.
It loses me money. A commercial farm makes money, right? A hobby farm loses. It gives back to me in so many other ways. But no, I still make my living outside the farm. So this is a hobby farm. Yeah.
The kids, so what are the kids thinking about it now? Because you said, how old are they now? They were 11. How old when you first moved there?
So they were 11, 9, and 7, and they are now 15, 13, and 11. And I think I would answer that.
So what do they think now? So it's been 4 years, living on the farm. They had this experience before they moved to the farm, which was, like the typical, city kind of urban experience that kids have living in or near Capitol Hill. Or suburban experience living in or near Capitol Hill, and now they're experiencing the farm life. What are they telling you besides teaching tricks to the chickens?
Right. They love it, Joe. And I got to tell you, this is a conversation that Brooke and I had. A year from now, or 2 years from now, or 4 years from now, are the kids going to be tired of it? Is it going to be something that they view as a duty? And it has not been that way, Joe. It has become a part of who they are. It's given them a sense of duty, of responsibility. It's gotten them out in God's creation on a consistent basis. And, it's not all easy for sure. It's hard work. In fact, before I see them in the morning, very often they have already been outside to do their round of chores. And, my kids are wonderful, wonderful kids, but they, like every child, usually have to be prodded to do the tasks in their chore list, right? Not these. The animals are so special to them, and they see them as their responsibility. They are out there on their own volition. There is an inevitable life and death cycle on the farm. We lost some baby ducks just a few weeks ago. That was actually pretty grievous for them. But I will tell you, Joe, I think this is one of the reasons that God gave us this charge, is because it connects us to his creation, and it becomes a part of you, and a part of you don't want to give up.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's project out 10 years. Is it possible that one of your kids might become, given what's going on in the world, a vegan, and then say, I don't eat meat, or could that be spurred by the fact that they've grown to love the animals so much that the thought of eating one of them is more than they can bear?
So this was when we got our first set of pigs. Their names were Bert and Ernie, and we were told not to name the pigs, Joe, because they would be too attached to them come time to process.
Bert and Ernie, that's really.
Bert and Ernie.
Yeah.
Bert and Ernie. Yeah. We took a different approach. We thought that the way to steward it the best was to love them while we had them and provide them the best life that we could. I now firmly believe that is the correct approach and the one that provides them the right life. That first processing was hard. It was hard for them to deal with it. However, when it landed on the plate, it was the best bacon they had ever tasted. So, with all due respect to my vegan friends, look, God calls us to different people to different diets, Joe. Okay, he does, and so maybe they will.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they can give up that bacon. I would probably bet it.
If you missed the first segment of our program, please go to our website or YouTube channel to hear all of it. The topic is caring for creation, especially animals, and our guest is a Christian leader named Nathaniel Bennett, who says if God cares about animals, so should we. That's our discussion on tonight's program, and we're just having a great time talking. Stay with us.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
Welcome back, Than. And some organizations exist to prevent animals from being harvested for food. They take a very different view of what the stewardship of the earth and its resources might look like. Are there areas of cooperation, and is it important to work together even with these groups that may see it differently than the way that you and many others may see it? I'm a meat eater too, by the way. I eat meat and fish and all those things. So I guess I'm on your side of that ledger. But is it important to work together with folks who don't see it the same way?
You know, Joe, my view is it's important to work together with people of all different backgrounds and all different ideologies across a range of issues. And in fact, I think if we're not willing to do that, it suggests that we actually don't believe in the strength of our own ideas because we're not willing to test them against the ideas of others and to actually take the best of our ideas and the best of theirs and to make good public policy. So I would just say across the board on that front, yes, we should be working with groups like that. But on this issue particularly, I think it's important to first separate out how you're going to look at this politically from how you're going to look at it as a follower of Jesus Christ. Look, we can have differences of opinion on, you know, who should regulate, how that we should regulate, or whether or not we should regulate. But Joe, I think all of us have a duty to look to Scripture and to see this mandate, that has been given down to us, this invitation to us to steward care of animals. And so if there is a group that comes to it from a slightly different perspective, I think that is something that we should be able to work with them. And I would point you to this, 1 Corinthians 10, where it talks about, you know, whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do it to the glory of God. Joe, I think that says that our first question should not be, what does my political party say about this? Or what does my political opponent say about this? I think the question should be, how do I interact with this topic in a way that amplifies the name of God and brings glory to his name? And if we start there, Joe, I bet we're going to have an awful lot of overlap with people that we thought we disagreed with.
Yeah, that very well said. Here in Pennsylvania, there are large Christian-run farming operations like the Clemens family. They have Hatfield Meats, which is very, very well known. And they've decided to modernize their facilities to improve the lives of the animals in their care, which is something that we're talking about. What can be learned from studying what that family has done? I mean, they're I think they're in the top 10 pork producers in the country. Can we learn from what the folks that do Hatfield Meats, how they're handling this?
I think we can learn a whole lot. I'm familiar with what they've done, and what I love the most about what they've done, Joe, is that they didn't wait to be told to do it, right? They took a look at their own responsibility and they led the way. They said, we think this is the most responsible way to care for the animals that we are raising, to treat them the most humanely, and oh, by the way, provide an excellent product to our consumers. They took on that cost. They led the way. They showed initiative. And, you know, I don't think it's an accident, Joe, that it's proven to be an overwhelming business success as well. So I think that's what we can take away. Not so much the business success, but also that it does work in business if we're willing to lead the way. And one last thought on this that I really want to mention. I know you and your producer, Jeff Coleman, have had a conversation about seeing animals as more than just their industrial inputs and how that connects to how we relate with human beings. This is something that my wife talks about a lot. When we think about animals as more than just their value to us, but instead thinking about how we can care for them, Joe, it fosters compassion in us. And so it naturally then blends over to how we treat our fellow mankind. It is a much more natural progression than, on the one hand, to say a lesser form of created doesn't deserve our compassion. Oh, but by the way, when it comes to treating humans, you're just going to flip a switch and you're going to have compassion. It doesn't work that way. There should be a natural progression, and treating animals humanely fosters that compassion and makes it a much more seamless transition.
Yeah, and as you were saying earlier, I've heard this said before as well, that animals that have been treated compassionately taste better. I know I've been to other countries where somebody, I had fresh cooked leg of lamb where the animals were treated with compassion, and the leg of lamb was delicious, actually. It was the best I'd ever had. I couldn't get enough of it, actually. It was so good. But Than, you've encouraged me tonight and helped me think through an issue that, quite frankly, hasn't always been the top of my mind. But I learned a lot, and I hope you'll come back and talk with us soon. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Appreciate you.
Great. We'll be right back with our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
And now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
I think we need to apologize to our viewers who are watching this late at night and they've had their dinner and they want some of that lamb that you described and then the bacon and all that. Look, Than makes a very important point, and I think the important point is when we're viewing issues, any issue, but especially when it comes to the creation care, that we cannot look through the lens of our politics first. We have to look at the issue, identify the problems, and then decide where do we weigh in on it. What do we have to say about it? What does God have to say about it? Does he even care about it at all? That would, as he said, change a lot of the ways that we approach just about everything, where we are being asked by the culture, by the media, by political leaders to put every issue, including the care and stewardship of animals, onto the political grid. And you just can't do that with everything.
Right. Well, if you have love in your heart, it would just seem to me, again, that even if you haven't thought about it, as many people haven't, I know
Right.
This wasn't something that I was thinking about. At the same time, you would still be kind to animals. You would want them to be treated in a humane way. You'd want to be treated the way you would treat it if you were, in a similar situation, I suppose.
But we have been, I think, many who are maybe perhaps on the more conservative side of issues, like us, have been viewing the issue of animal care as a progressive issue.
Yeah.
When really this shouldn't be one of those issues that divides. It actually should be a point of unity where you can come together. And someone who cares about an animal may not consume animals for sustenance, but they may enjoy animals as pets. Well, there's some common ground there. You may be a cat lover, you may be a dog lover, but you still know that your house is being shared with someone from the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
So I know that when we wade into issues like this that aren't kind of top of mind always, but really are a part of our lives, there's a danger in people saying, why are they talking about these issues? But we have to think through everything in life and not just act instinctually.
Right. Are you a meat eater?
I am.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, let's go eat.
Yeah, I'm ready. In the Old Testament book of Jonah, God replied to the grumbling prophet who was angry for his assignment of preaching salvation to the Ninevites. When the story concludes, God asked Jonah why he shouldn't show mercy to the city of 120,000 and also many animals. What a funny but pointed way of ending a sentence, and also many animals. You see, God cares about everything he created, and he cares a lot about you and me. I hope tonight's conversation with Than challenged your thinking and gave you hope. If it did, drop me a comment in the box at joewatkins.org. We love to read your comments, and I'll reply to every single one of them. For Jeff Coleman and the production team here at Lighthouse TV, I'm Joe Watkins from America's first capital, Philadelphia. Thanks so much for watching us and for welcoming us into your home. God willing, I'll see you next week.
Do you have any pets?
No.
No pets, Carl?
No, but the Bert and Ernie story about the two pigs that became the most delicious bacon that they had ever eaten was...
Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.